Welcome to Tech Alley AI Meetup. I'm Tim May, I host the event. I'm having Joshua Stacy talk today, and we're going to turn it over. Before I do, I would encourage any of you that are not already members of the AI Meetup on meetup.com to go ahead and join. That way I can let you know before each Tech Alley Meetup what we're going to be talking about. So just a handy thing to do. And if you guys want to find me on LinkedIn and engage in conversation, or if you have a subject you'd like to present on, or a particular area of interest you'd like to suggest as a topic that we might cover here, let me know. I appreciate it. Again, it's Timothy May on LinkedIn.com. So Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you. By the way, we have a microphone. If you have questions, let me know, and I'll bring the microphone to you.
Okay. Actually, so I have a plan for this.
What's that?
I'll get to it. It's in my presentation. There's a section called housekeeping. All right. So raise your hand if you've seen me present before. Okay. Cool. So these people, if you didn't raise your hand, they all came again. Nice.
Raise your hand if you think he's a good presenter.
Oh, raise your hand if you think I'm a good presenter is what's been asked. Okay, we've got two hands. Okay. We'll find out at the end. We'll ask that question at the end. We'll ask. Okay. So today we're going to talk about agentic interaction. Here's the agenda. This is an image that was created with Grok. I normally use ChatGPT. However, this was meant to be a bear in the form of the thinker. So, introduce myself, a little housekeeping, introduce my work, use cases with local businesses, agentic interactions, what? Grace and Company, time permitting, we'll get into fine-tuning with OpenAI, major legal tech disruption discussion, massive workflow restriction, and a Q&A, in case there's any questions that I might offer some answers for. So, about me, that was my first computer. Let me give it. Not that one specifically, but it was a Toshiba T1600. It had a processor that in high power mode could do 12 megahertz. In normal mode, only 6 megahertz. And it came equipped, mine had a 20 megabyte hard drive, but they came as high as 40 megabyte hard drives.
6 pounds.
It was a luggable laptop. So actually there's a little handle here that it's more of a wrist rest than a carrying it. It also had a 9600 baud modem. So I like to study and solve large complicated problems. I'm the CEO of a growing software company, bigtb.com. And the last server I bought had half a terabyte of RAM. So if we're looking at the, yeah, go ahead, just come on in. We've got plenty of seats over here. All right. The difference in the most recent server that I bought versus that first laptop computationally is enormous. It's jaw-dropping. I don't even, in high school I went from the T1600 with the 6 to 12 megahertz processor to a Pentium 233 MMX. Oh my goodness, it was so fast. Now my dad, he got a phone recently. It was $150 and it has 2 gigahertz processors or something crazy like that. So you might think, oh my goodness, what could we do with all of this compute power? We'll get to that. So housekeeping, if you have a question or comment, come up to my right. I'll hand you the mic. And this will help us keep track of some things. So there's about, 40, 50 people here. We'll have a lot more people watch the video. And if you don't speak into this mic, they can't hear you. And it's very disruptive. So housekeeping-ish. And then if I see you come over here, I'll be like, oh. And then we can keep order. Yeah. And then, keep comments focused. We have a lot of good discussion. I'd love to have some great discussion in here. But also there's some really cool stuff we can get to. So let's not get too hung up on things that aren't that interesting, perhaps. Okay. So what do I do at Big TB? And it's bigtb.com is the business. Yes, I have a 5-letter.com for my business. Product launches, internal. We build our own things and we go out and take them to the world and say, hey, we made this thing. Use it. We also help other people with the stuff that they want to build. Lots of good building skills. We do consulting, workflow improvement. All this means is businesses have a lot of processes they're using now that we want to apply technology to. So how do we apply technology to what they're doing now to make that better? Engineering, network and infrastructure, internet software development. We do the plug the fridge into the toaster type customization. So if there's systems that don't normally talk to each other, don't normally do things, well, we can do that. So how is AI actually useful? Does anybody have any thoughts on how AI has actually been useful. Feel free to come up to either side. I have arms on both sides. Okay, we've got two takers. Oh, we've got one on the right. Come on up. All right, so what is a way that AI is useful?
I guess mainly in medicine with image recognition technology to be able to detect cancers.
Okay, yeah, so that's one of my favorite use cases. So at Big TB, one of the things we're doing is we have a specific goal of trying to launch 8,000 products. And so the level of difficulty gets higher. The medical imaging's in the 800 to 900. Super, super excited about it. All right, if anybody else wants to come up, and okay, all right. Well, I got three examples we'll go over. One, an online retailer that wants to have a more personal touch with customers. There's lots of online retailers out there. The more you interact with them and have a personalized experience, the better. A business consultancy that wants to deliver a personalized service at scale. And then the third use case we'll look at is a nonprofit that's focusing on providing emotional support for staff and volunteers. So these are all use cases that I think that AI current generation AI shines on. First, we'll take a look at the online retailer. So part of what I do when I take on a new client is we go over where they have their information now. Now in this case, the client has order history, but the symbols and explanations for what the order history are don't necessarily, you can't just copy and paste it. It has little codes and little things. If you got an email that said, based off your order of item 379X, we'd like you to buy item 423G. And it's like, well, that's not like. So with language models, oh, actually, we'll go ahead. So retailer also spends a lot of time and money, or a lot of money, paying staff to chase quotes. So there are people who say, oh, I want to buy this thing. Well, I'm not sure yet, or whatever. And so he has to pay people to call and send emails and send text messages and stay engaged. So what solutions can AI provide on this? Okay, step one, language models. Language models are just that. Most people, when they think about AI, they think about an LLM because that's what most people are interacting with. And a language model is meant to be an interface between humans and the computer. And so if you take any siloed business data and you run it through a language model, you can actually get something that would look pretty good in an email. And so when we're looking at their email marketing, a part of what we've been doing is taking a look at their data and the known data points and really crafting messages specific to that user. It's not just, here's one great message that goes out to 10,000 people. It's, here's 10,000 people all getting a highly customized, very individualized, very specific email message to them. Okay, so we're going to get into the agentic side of this a little bit, and I'll dig into it more, but you can have an AI agent go through and do all of the remarketing to your customers, have them send the text messages, have them send the emails, have them send out everything that needs sent. So that's pretty cool. That's all things that matter. These are all things that would drive higher engagement, better brand loyalty, all of these other things that business might like. So use case 2 we'll get into quite a bit more in subsequent slides, but it's a business consultancy. So this is one of my favorite clients. I love these guys. They're fabulous. They have businesses all over the state of Nevada they coach. They do great with them. And they say, we want to make this more scalable. Us as individuals going one-on-one, yes, it's very effective. But beyond that, we need a way to stay more engaged and really scale up there. I copied this slide, and that was supposed to be on the other one. So what AI solutions could this provide for the business consultancy? Well, businesses have lots and lots and lots of parts of them. Lots and lots. And so what the language models, raise your hand if you've had we'll do this a little bit. Raise your hand if you've used any AI product whatsoever. All right, reset. Now, raise your hand if you've done any programming with it, meaning you're asking it a technical question and then digging back and forth. All right. Now, reset. Raise your hand if you've done like fine tuning and gone way deep on this stuff. Okay, excellent. So for those, one last question for the audience. Raise your hand if you know what a context window is. Okay, great. I'm gonna make, now we're gonna ask that question again in a minute, and I expect more hands to be up. Maybe not all. So So with AI, a context window is what matters a lot, right? If you've ever tried to think of 10 numbers at the same time and forgot some, that's sort of the context window, the number of numbers that you could remember simultaneously and keep in mind. Think about that like context. So a lot of AI, specifically with language models, they have these huge data sets, and you're asking them to only focus on a limited portion in a limited way. And the output and the quality of your work goes up radically if you're able to tighten up that context window and really explain what's going on. So in this use case, we did something that was, in my humble opinion, genius. And we really segmented down every aspect of the business and made a structured format for this. So what I mean by this is, there's an initial intake that we do on this product where we ask between 70 and 100 questions. And that gives us a very comprehensive knowledge base about that particular business, where it is right now, where's their revenue, where's their marketing, where's their strengths, where's their weaknesses, what their competitors doing. And then we use that as our initial body of data to go ahead and say, okay, we want this in context. But to make this even more specific, let's say we want to make a marketing campaign. Okay, great. Everybody's on social media sites now. We've got to put all our content out. How do we do this? If you just said, make me a marketing campaign, an untrained model with no context is going to give you a wall of text, and it's going to say, crafting a plan is a great idea. It'll help you grow your business. Here's 10 paragraphs. We've all seen the prompts. We see the asterisks right now. So what we did is we took that context of that business and put it into a strategic plan for that business, segmented out. So this means, let's say we're doing a marketing plan. We don't need to know everything about the business, right? Their payroll numbers, for example, for last year. That's not really a great marketing message thing. So what we do is we have the system create basically a summary of the business, and then a marketing plan. When it's generating that, it's only using an organized set of data, which means you can use the rest of the context window to do all of the other interesting, cool things that you want it to do. So so context window, it's how much the AI can think of at the same time is one way of thinking of it. Okay, quick question. Who knows what a context window is now? Okay, much more hands. That's excellent. Okay. So nonprofit, staff, and volunteer support. Now this is a product I'd really like to take to market at massive scale because I think it's really cool. What we can do, so raise your hand if you've had a conversation. Okay, yeah, raise your hand. So imagine, if you will, so some folks sit down and talk to ChatGPT like it's a friend, like it's a person. In fact, I've heard rumors of engineers saying things like, I love you, you're wonderful, you're the best friend I never knew I had. So, question, raise your hand if you've ever talked to it about like a personal thing, right? Oh, I don't understand this, okay. If you're not using it for your personal life, you're selling yourself short. It's so good with people. I have a whole slide about this a little later, but it's so good with people. So, with a nonprofit, right, it's got a diverse background of staff and volunteers, so we don't have all of the same cultural references, for example, and I'm not making a posit about any faith in particular. However, if you were at like a nonprofit, it was all based on Christianity, you'd all have similar value systems that you would use as perhaps a cohesive structure to provide support for everyone. But if you're a nonprofit that has all sorts of people with different belief systems, views, values, how do you provide individual support, especially if you're working with, let's say it's a foster, with foster kids, things like this, anywhere it's sensitive and draining. A lot of nonprofits can't afford to have a staff psychologist, right? We might say, okay, it would be great if we had some therapists and everything. So what solutions can AI provide? Well, here's the thing. AI is able to carry on a conversation simultaneously with a relatively unlimited number of people. So let us imagine, if you will, there's 100 people working at a nonprofit and they have 100 volunteers. Even if you hired a psychologist, anybody of this nature, you're only going to have 1, 2, 3 assets across, call it 200 people who would potentially need it. With AI, you're able to drive the cost of these conversations down to an almost trivial amount. We're probably talking less than a quarter for what would be considered a typical sort of like, I'm not going to go like a therapy session, not all the way to that level of detail, but at least some interaction there. And this would give every person on that staff and every volunteer 24/7 7-day-a-week access to having a resource that they can talk to that's actually going to be able to understand where they're at, meet them where they're at, walk them through that. So raise your hand if I've said at least one use case that you think is good for AI that would help a business. Okay, if you're not raising your hand, I just don't know what to tell you. I challenge you to come up and give me better use cases there. Okay, so with all of this is sort of the background, right? I said agentic interface. We haven't talked a lot about agentic interface yet. Okay, so what is agent-focused design? Big picture, I think it's the most obvious way to bridge customers with current web technologies and computer technologies at scale. Okay, I'll explain that a bit more. Most humans already use email and or SMS. So if we're trying to connect people to technology, and LLMs already understand technology, the only little inch we need there is to do an SMS bridge or an email bridge. So let's focus on building an agent. Most of us, I met some new people today, they walked up, they said hi, we talked, it was great. And why don't we talk to computers that way, right? Raise your hand if you watched Star Trek. Okay, right. Computer, make an estimate. Excellent. Where's this technology? We have better now. So anyway, focus on building an agent. So in a technical sense, what is an agent? Now I'm expecting some pushback. Now I presented once upon a time here about WordPress, and someone heckled me, and I thought that was a little aggressive for Tech Alley, but it happened. This is a more controversial subject, perhaps, a little bit more exciting, a little bit more engaging in some ways, and I might even use some language that is not what other people are using. Please feel free to push back on it. I'm still going to stick with my language because it helps me understand what the hell I'm talking about. Okay, so an agent, as I'm using the term, it's a set of scripts and programs that are basically designed to interact to make it feel like you're talking to one cohesive person. And we think about multiple agent interactions. A lot of times we might think about it as, oh, well, I have this script and it does this, I have this script and it does that, and here's this agent doing that. But we interact with people by walking. Now, side note, there's 3 E's to describe me. I'm an entrepreneurial, extroverted engineer. So I love walking around talking to people saying hi. So for me, this is the most natural thing, just because that's the way that we normally interact. So how do we bring this to, so why does an agentic interface, or focusing on an agent, why does that matter? It helps organize, structure, and consolidate information to make the best use of that context window. We're only dealing with the information at the time that is the most relevant at the time. If I'm working on a social media content plan, I don't need to know the equipment history of all of the tractors and trucks at the business. It's just not relevant. And the more available context window we have for the task at hand, we'll radically see improvements in the quality of the output. As a bonus, we get a lot more control over how we contextualize the data. So this means we're able to really tighten in on the focus. Okay, actually, drift and hallucination. Raise your hand if you know what drift or hallucination are. All right, cool. Drift, you're talking to it, and it's sort of wandering off. You start off talking about ice cream, somehow it gets onto pudding, and later we're talking about trees, and we just don't know how we got there. Drift. Hallucination is it just making stuff up. By tightening the contextualization of everything that you're doing, it helps prevent drift and it helps avoid hallucinations if you're prompting it right. The 3 C's of high quality output are context, context, context. It's according to me, of course. And so by taking a look at agents as the way of organizing information, it also gives us a natural flow of the information. So if we have a primary agent that's ingesting all of the information and says, well, we need this other task done, we can just take the pieces of this original body of data that they have, send that over to the sub-agent or task that's doing it, and now this agent over here is only working with the information that's relevant to what it has going on. It doesn't have any extraneous information attached to it, or so we think. This allows for structuring different specific aspects of the business, such as marketing goals, with definable terms like budget, and provides a 360-degree view of the business. And I'm talking about a business, but it could be anything that you're trying to do a deep dive on. If you take whatever it is that you want to use AI to process, and you say, we're going to break it up into 7 groups, and here's how we're going to submit it, all of your information organization is going to be a lot easier to have more reliable outputs with. which is just a fancy way of saying everything's on the same page and everything can be pre-processed for subsequent tasks. So for example, well, we'll go through some examples actually when I get into this. Okay, raise your hand if you know what McKinsey & Company is. Okay, Grace & Company is a nod to that. It's sort of a poke in the ribs actually. So this is Grace & Company. It's a bunch of agents. For those that don't know, McKinsey & Company is a huge consulting company. They advise businesses and non-government organizations and governments and all sorts of stuff. So, oh, what's that?
Big money.
Big money is what they're saying. Exactly. And this is like the little guy tech. I love it. It's like super advanced. It's anyway. So with Grace & Company, Grace is the primary agent. You text her, you message her on the platform, you email, you interact. She understands you. And then, so Grace has that assessment, then she takes it to other ones, like Mark in marketing. Come on, Mark, marketing. Okay, I'm getting some relenting sighs, okay. Okay, so from the user's perspective, now, for a non-technical person, they can say, oh, well, I talked to Grace, and she walked me through all of these things. And then Grace said I should talk to Mark. Now, it's all going to the same machines and APIs and servers anyway, but this is the contextualization, and we're able to garner the contextualization as natural as a conversation because of this magnificent feat that's happened in the last few years where these are really discussion-based. I didn't do the... Anyway, so how does Grace help a business owner? She learns about the business and provides an overview executive plan. Now, again, using this in the case of a business, it could be for anything. It could be for whatever it is that you're trying to look at. These are concepts that could be generalized. We could take a look at it as health, right? An individual's health, break it down into every part of the respiratory system. You got your cardiovascular system, and then subset it. And now we've got much more narrow context. And then one of the other things that we've done, so Grace, as it sits right now, we're working on this as a third generation product, meaning about a little over a year ago, we launched our first generation of it. About 4 or 5 months after that, we launched the next generation of it, and then we're probably within 30 days of launching this third generation of it, where she's actually going to give tasks that are assignable and delegatable. And so this is what I've been spending an awful lot of time really digging in the weeds on over the last month or so, is how do you take these great systems we have for managing and organizing and structuring information and make it useful? And so a part of my design thesis behind it, or a design concept, is I want to be able to meet the user where they're at. I said, well, everybody uses SMS, or so damn close, we might as well say everybody. So why not have that be the point of interaction? Okay. So I've been yapping a bit. Got a section now. If anybody would like to do some questions, we can come up. We can hop topics a bit. Okay, I need a running around volunteer to bring the, thank you, the distinguished gentleman in the front.
Hello. I don't know if it's working.
It's working.
Okay. Hello, my name is Betty. My question for you is it an agent is not like a chatbot, because a chatbot, you feed it any information, but an agent can like get all the information and then make decisions like about going to Mark, for example. Is that the difference between the chatbot and the agent?
So this is a great question. I appreciate you setting it up like this. Yeah, all right. We would like the mic back. We can do the retrieval.
I'm sorry.
I should have taken Tim up on it. All right. That's all right. It's a community event. We got lots of good volunteers. So the question is essentially an agent versus a chatbot. So they're different, but if you understand a chatbot, it's a lot easier to get to explaining what an agent is. So as it sits right now, if you've been interacting with a chatbot, right, you go, you look at the chatbot, maybe you tell the chatbot some things, maybe it gives you some feedback. What makes an agent different is, think about it like the agent manages a chatbot. It's not quite like that, but you've got the agent. We'll make a very simplified example of it. Let's say the agent is an executable file on my computer, right? Grace.exe. So it has a chatbot as part of it, so you can interact with it, but also it can run all of the other scripts and do all of the other programming that we have. So our PHP, our Python, our JavaScript, our Node, our Nuxt, whatever the hell else we're plugging it into. And where this makes it a transformative leap, in my biased opinion, is we can then, for example, spin that off to a task and have it be assigned. So for example, we'll walk through a workflow on here. Let's say you say, okay, I talked to Grace. She understands everything about my business. I do photography, I do whatever I do, and now I need to do something. Well, so she might say, hey, well, you probably need a social media marketing footprint, right? You probably have something. What if you don't have something, you need something, and if you have something, you could probably make it better. Let's assign this task. And what ends up happening is that task can get assigned to another workflow that I'm describing as an agent. But that agent is the embodiment of whatever you can get a computer to do. And so I can call Grace and say, okay, here's this thing, it's Grace. And your primary interaction with it right now is submission forms and a chatbot type interaction. But on the back end, that can trigger all sorts of other things, such as hiring a vendor to do your social media marketing. So there's a marketing company in town. We've got a relationship with them. We can literally farm out. So like, let's say you're a construction company. You don't know a thing about Facebook or X or whatever. That's not what you do. Okay, great. So Grace could literally manage the whole vendor relationship, and the user can just go, oh, I want to hire this company to do X, Y, and Z. Then Grace hands that task list to the vendor and facilitates everything and then returns and reports. So since you don't have the mic,
I can
but well, the viewers at home. So thumbs up or thumbs down on if I answered your question?
decent.
Okay, decent. All right, I'll take a decent. All right. What other questions do we have? We have some great questions that come up here. Great discussion at times.
Sorry, I'm purple too. So this is kind of two parts, but they're quick, I promise. One is, so is deployment for this, is the general architecture generally like a microservices where you kind of make each agent a service? And also with the context window, that looks like there'll be a lot of sensitive or even classified information in that. So in practice, do you start off like, is it like a JSON or an XML? And then do you have to use like a secret manager so that that's not just sitting in plain text in your code somewhere that other people could see?
All right, so go ahead and hold on to your mic.
Okay.
All right, so question one is deployment. So one of the things about being an extroverted engineer is that my mind goes like all over the place on some problems, and normally it's an introvert engineer brain and they look at things differently. So I get some funny looks sometimes, like, no, I'm technical, I promise. So when it comes to deployment, so as a starting point, you're going to have all of the APIs for anything that you're going to be using, such as the language models. Now, I don't use AWS anyway.
The spitting wasn't necessary, really.
No, it was. And I'll explain why. I've been playing with computers for more than 2 decades. I don't need to pay someone else to manage my network. It's 5 to 10 times the cost. AWS has done a lot to help innovation. A lot of people have been able to build and have a computer to work off of in environments. It's just not for me. You could take a look at this agentic approach and apply it with whatever technology stack you're using, so long as the following are applicable. One, you need a place to store some information about the user that is not in the context of the API. So OpenAI does store some context of discussions, but really there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to want to do that either that's the wrong tool for, or it's too expensive for, or whatever. There's a lot of, or it's sensitive, classified, whatever you don't want to pass through.
Can you put it just in a token or a cookie?
Well, so you've got client side, which is on the browser, the device, and then you've got server side where the server's going on. So typically to make the agent puppetry work, you start with a server side base, right? You've got your database. So for example, the way that we have the user, I'm not giving away state secrets here. The way we have the agents organized is essentially they're users as any other user on a platform. It's just we're designating them to do the tasks associated with whatever that is. So for example, if we have a project management software set up and an agent is assigned, here's your task list, it goes through, does the task list, does the report, and then it goes back and forth. So the sort of on-off from wherever your platform is, you're going out and you're reaching out to those, so for example, part of why this is, I think, a brilliant way to do it, is you're able to take all of the information, right? So let's say, so I don't work in the government space. I don't like the government. It's part of why I live in Las Vegas. But
There are a lot of us here.
so anti-government rant inserted, moved past. You might have information that's sensitive for any number of reasons. Like I'll give you an example. Maybe you're working for a business and you've got payroll information on there and it's got their home address, phone number, social security number. None of that is relevant for a marketing plan. And so by having everything structured in I'm going to call it like a Web 2 or a traditional web environment. I like bare metal, people like AWS, other people use Google Cloud, whatever they use. That's sort of your base. But then what you're doing is you're essentially having these personas just as the act of fiction that allows folks to conceptualize, from a non-technical folks, to conceptualize what it is to ask the computer to do the thing. And then in the process, we're segmenting it out.
Is it like a REST API or is it like a pub sub, just like where you got like a message broker like RabbitMQ to talk with it?
Well, so we're currently using Ajax and a whole bunch of other things. So like it's think about it like this. This is the way to plug everything in together. So if you've got the user and they're sitting there and they're saying, okay, I want this thing. Now we've got the ability to have it manage all of the, like, for example, let's say you've got a Python script that does the social media thing. I'm not suggesting that we do that, but let's just say it was a Python script. Someone goes to Mark, oh, I want to do this. Mark goes, okay, need to do social media. Okay, run Python script. Now, is there any reason why, for example, Grace couldn't do that? No. It's helping work with the existing limitations of the context windows and also keeping workflows organized. Because here's the other thing. Let's say you're building this thing out. You got to think of where the information starts. Okay, it starts with Grace. Grace knows everything. Well, then every time we build another agent out from it, instead of saying, let's do an intake with the client again, it's let's ask Grace about it, because that's the most frictionless thing from the user's perspective. So, all right.
Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Got one? Oh, we got one more. Then we'll get back to it. Oh, we got two more. You got to, all right. And I'm just checking the time.
Oh, sorry. So mainly from a hosting perspective with an agent, would it be better to utilize Kubernetes or bear like a shared service? Okay,
yeah. So Kubernetes works a lot like a Docker swarm, yeah? Okay, I got a yes. So with so you want it to be somewhere that is persistent. And so like, just full disclosure, I don't, like you guys that are doing stuff on AWS and whatever, it's way more complicated than the way I deal with it. You guys have to spin things up and blah, blah, blah. So I have a server that's on 24/7 because we do that. So for example, let's say you had an agent that was getting really busy. A Kubernetes cluster would be great. Like the concept is you have some persistent traditional environment that's reaching out to the APIs on for OpenAI, or if you're self-hosting something too, like for example, to go back to what do we do with sensitive information? One of the things you can do is, depending on the model, some of them you can't get away with, but you could self-host the model so all of the information staying on your own bare metal, it's not ever leaving anywhere, it's not going anywhere. Excellent. And we have one more over here. Oh,
I just have a quick question on your self-hosting scenario. That sounds pretty cool.
Okay.
So I work with a lot of enterprise, and we're all Azure, AWS, as you can imagine. But for are you talking about you host all this stuff on your in your bedroom kind of thing? And
that's a great question, and I thank you for it. No, it lives at a server farm, like a server lives. It's just I'm the admin on it.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So quick rant. AWS charges a lot for microservices. That's the way that they make their money. And if you are hosting a machine that's on all the time, you can just run all of your own services and not have to deal with it. My initial self-hosted venture started with a MySQL database of every consumer record in the US of everyone over the age of 18. 12 years ago, I made that searchable in under 30 seconds. Then I could get it to under 2 seconds. I could probably get it to under a second now, but now we're just splitting some hairs that don't matter. The cost, the reason I mention this is the cost for hosting it with Amazon with their RDS, relational database services, would have been by a factor of 10 more expensive than self-hosting.
Right, so you can put something on like just a VMs on DigitalOcean and then write all your custom services.
Yeah, I mean, excellent. No, it just knocked something loose here. You could do this on little $5 DigitalOcean droplet. It's the idea that you have this persistent storage with a couple of data points that you're using it to manage the API, not, and it becomes transformative to the point where you're actually doing things over here. So for example, let's say you're doing the social media, fine, you go grab the content, but then you actually need to go post it, right? You got APIs for X and LinkedIn and Pinterest and whatever else. So then now you're having wherever you're hosting this at, your VPS, whatever the box is now triggering those actions. So that's really doing the lifting.
Oh, nice.
Excellent.
Cool, yeah, because AWS is just like getting worse every day, like orchestration, step functions, their documentation is all obfuscated. It's worse than SAP. But that's cool. So you can actually, and it's probably just Apache Camel under the hood.
It's a LAMP stack. I run a LAMP stack. I love a LAMP stack. And then you might be like, oh, PHP sucks. Like, I put Node on it. It runs Python. Whatever it is I need, it's there. And I'm the system admin. I can go all the way down to the kernel. Okay, as we were saying. Okay, so what does this look like? So there's Grace. And there's what this assessment looks like. Okay, we've got all these different, I think this is an older one, it's got 3 peaks, we should have 7. But, so this is a screenshot of a Figma, so it's not in live production yet. However, everything here is actually currently working on our, it should be camera ready in a week. And this is what it should look like. But, basically, so the user starts off and it says, okay, great, we've got seven surveys for you. Answer these 70 questions. Then we'll know everything about you. And it says, your strategy's okay. Your personal development's good. Your people sucks. It says 54. For those that can't see it, that's why. Okay, so it develops a plan, it gives you an assessment off of each of those areas, and then it gives you a roadmap. And the roadmap is a list of tasks with subtasks that's delegatable. So a business owner could say, I'm going to hand this off to my staff, I'm going to do this myself, or I'm going to hand this over to a vendor. But it's all part of one cohesive plan that Grace can keep track of. And so, okay, moment of truth for Josh. Does this sound like an interface that you would find more natural to use than a command line? Raise your hand if you would use this over a command line. Okay, raise your hand if you love command line. Okay, so we've got some bias there. No, this is what I'd expect. This is okay. So the agent manages the agents. So we conceptualize, so I do a lot in WordPress. This isn't the way that I would necessarily say to do it, but one of the ways that you could do it is set up Grace, or Grace is mine, get your own. You can have Greg, I guess. Okay, so you take that, set it up as a user. So now all of the things that a user on your platform of whatever you would be doing is able to do. So for example, I use WordPress. If I put on BuddyPress, it's like a knockoff of a social media site. All of a sudden we've got some database schema set up. It's my LAMP stack, so I love it. We've got the M there. So now there's a lot of plugins that already give task lists to users or already assign things to users. And this is technology agnostic. If you're using any type of prepackaged anything, you can go ahead and then assign. So now we've got our information flow. So and it doesn't have to be this way, but the reason why I decided to present it this way is, if you have a large body, right, I like to study and solve large, complicated problems. If you have a large set of data that you're trying to navigate, manage, do things, if you have one single agent that's tasked with ingesting and consolidating everything, and then you can spin off to sub-agents, you've got a more manageable set of workflows, so you don't have to have, for example, one program that can do everything, one workflow that can do everything. And you can also make it modular, so this way you've got different workflows for different people, different processes. Okay, Any questions on any of this? Any excitement? Okay. Who remembers my first theory of AI? You would have had to have been here in February or watched the video. I thought you might not remember. Large language models act as a collective chorus of human thought, enabling unprecedented understanding and connection by processing our shared knowledge faster and more deeply than individual minds alone. An example I'd use on this, I'm an ordained elder. For the first almost 3 decades of my life, I was a very devout Mormon. I studied the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, the Pearl of Great Price, bloody talks, church history. I'm still easily a Mormon scholar. No individual human could achieve that level of understanding across, for example, let's say 10 religions, 10 faiths, 10 lifestyles. Yet we have these language models that have ingested information about billions of people, cultures, understandings. And it's not, we could pick any one of us at random here. The language model would probably be able to pick up how to communicate with you pretty fast. And it would understand me. And if we ever had any disharmony or miscommunication, it can understand what we're both saying and help serve as sort of a connector, a melding there. And so when we think about that in the business sense, we think about it with these agents. Wouldn't it be so cool? So one of the jokes I made earlier about Grace, in an earlier version of it, was that she would have multiple personalities. And you're like, well, that doesn't sound stable. And it's like, well, kind of. So I'm a certain way here now, right? I'm presenting, it's Tech Alley, I'm excited. At home I'm a little different. If I'm on a Zoom call, I'm a little different. But Grace is able to, let me back up. One of the things that we tested, and I'm delighted at how well it works, is we start asking the users like 4 or 5 questions about how they handle certain things to understand their personality. And so for those, raise your hand if you're familiar with the DISC assessment. Myers-Briggs, Ocean. Okay, different personality tests. Okay, great. So we can actually gain a lot of insight from people based off of giving them either multiple choice questions or an open answer that lets us tailor what we're presenting specifically to them. And so this is where I say Grace was facing having multiple personalities, because if she's connecting with 100 personalities 100 different ways, she has 100 different personalities she's manifesting. So anyway, that's a part of the idea behind the agents being more individualized. All right, so, yeah, okay. And
is that personality just represented as part of the context window?
That's a great question. So the question is, was the personality part of the context window? And the answer is, okay, so for those that haven't fine-tuned ChatGPT, raise your hand if you want to hear the quick and dirty on how to fine-tune a model with OpenAI. Good. I was going to say it anyway. Just kidding, just kidding. I would have wondered who was here if they didn't find that interesting. So I'm almost done with the raise your hand, but raise your hand if you know what a JSON-L is. Okay, raise your hand if you know what JSON is. Okay, all right, cool. Okay, so a JSON is just a way of structuring information. If you don't know what that is, I can't cover that just right now. But if you know what a JSON is, which is what most of the people raised their hand said yes, JSON lines is just a series of JSON objects in a single file. And so if you're training, and literally I got an email from OpenAI yesterday saying that they made a different fine-tuning interface, but up until a day or two ago, the way you would do this, the only way to do this is you give it a large set of training data. And this is annoying because I'm going to say it's like they say at least 10, 20 is better, and they still see improvements at 50 and beyond. And you might say, Josh, 20 objects, 50 objects, that's not that many. That's true. However, what you're doing is you're giving it not just examples of the prompt, but you're giving it, so there's 3 layers to every interaction. There's the system prompt, the user prompt, and the assistant prompt. System prompt is the initial little bit of context you give it right before you give it this message. So like with Grace, for example, you are an advanced AI business consultant and you help businesses. So there's a little bit of the personality that comes in there. The user prompt is what you would type in on the ChatGPT interface and hit enter, and the assistant prompt is the response. To do fine-tuning, you need to give it all 3 responses. And if you're doing multi-turn, meaning there's a back and forth, you need to, for example, do user or system prompt, user prompt, assistant prompt, user prompt, assistant prompt for every object, and then make 20 to 50 of those ideally.
You have to do the whole chain of reasoning in one shot.
Yeah, you should do the chain of reasoning, exactly. And so it's laborious. Now, you might think, well, but surely it performs better then. And the answer is sometimes, and sometimes it performs worse. I once lobotomized a model. It went from knowing stuff to being very quiet. I wanted it to like tighten up its responses. And I'm like, all right, well, what type of, my business is going a little slow right now, just giving an example. We want some marketing, we're a landscaping company, and, it gets a little lean in the winter. And then it gave me like a high level overview, but it would never go deeper. I was like, okay, well, what do you really mean by that? It's like, well, you should do the thing. It's not helpful. And so you can also take a model that you tuned and tune it even further. In fact, I'll show you a part of where okay. So, all right, raise your hand if you want me to get a little more nerdy on some of the stuff. Okay, enough hands raised. So going back all those many years ago, 18 months ago, when we were building the first version of this business analysis tool, one of the problems was how do we structure the information? So one of the things that OpenAI does now that they did not do before is they allow for us to structure, so for example, let's say you've got 7 sections that you want of your output. I'm a nutritionist, I'm making health diet recommendations. I want to go over seven parts of your body, and here's diet recommendations to improve the health of each of these 7 categories. Well, how do you organize that? Problem 1, if you send everything over in one bucket and it comes back, you'll have continuity throughout it. If you try to do it, okay, here's one, then here's the next, then here's the next, and then string them all together, you start getting that drift. So for example, 7 would not be formatted the same way as 1 because it's going to wander around. So you say, okay, well, we want to put everything in 1. We had a double of a time with styling, so sometimes in our prompting we'd be like, under no circumstances use any punctuation to separate between levels. Use title, all one word, all caps. We had to make these different little indicators to say, okay, moving on to the next section, moving on to the next section. So fast forward, now we have fine tuning. So take that JSON object again, and instead of it just being system prompt, user prompt, assistant prompt, on the assistant prompt, you can structure your JSON object. So now each one of these sections is a declared, it's a declared piece. So it stays organized and it gives you the output in the same format every time. It's called structured outputs. And that was like a huge jump. Like the whole fact that we could use it at all a year and a half ago was incredible. The fact that we could use it now with structured outputs allows us to take that context window and not have to worry about these not being consistent with each other, but we can actually organize where the information's going and keep continuity. Now, the other thing is, moving forward, let's say we wanted to dive deeper on strategy. We could just take the strategy section and the initial corpus of data and do a deeper dive and still stay consistent. And then that made the roadmap where we give them the actual assignment list. So it's do this and subtasks. The structured outputs made that like crazy better. Has anybody else done any fine tuning? Okay, a few. All right. Okay, first theory of AI. Second theory of AI. Current generation. Now this was the same theory I had. So this theory is also from February, that current generation AI is an ignition point for radical educational transformation, the enormity of which would be impossible to overstate. So as theories go, these are meant to be heavy, weighty statements one could reflect on. And yes, I have the arrogance to believe I have thoughts and ideas that you could reflect on for a while. But the critical thing here for me is, I think sometimes people are waiting for like, what's the technology around the corner? When is this great excitement going to happen? And I got to tell you, like, the technology is there to be building this now. Where it really, really changes for me is you're now able to ask the robots how to build the robots. Like, that's like the craziest thing in the world. We're not just using tools to make tools. We're asking things that understand, I really like this image of this tree. Right? This is the expansiveness, this is meant to represent the expansiveness of all of human understanding that's able to be embodied in these, right? We've got wisdom from cultures all over the world. I got to tell you, one of the things what used to make me a little sad was like I was excited about studying all of my Mormon faith, but I'm like, but there's so many other great religions and value systems and belief structures out there. And now, one of the things that I do for fun when I'm showing people ChatGPT is I'll have it compare. So, for example, a good friend of mine is Buddhist. I had it compare the book of Nephi to some Buddhist teachings, and it gave some nice comparisons and like this interplay and reasoning of, okay, it's like this here and it's like this here. Like, it's so exciting for me. Like, because, when we think about, I'll share a little bit of a personal story since not everybody here knows me super well. So I have a daughter, and I love her to pieces. She had 4 brain surgeries by age 2. Doctor wasn't sure she'd live till age 3. You guys, I'll cut ahead. She turned 10 this year, and will probably turn 11 next year. It's a very happy story that way. One of the things that I'm immensely grateful for is tablet computing. So my daughter's nonverbal autistic. She's very cognitively delayed, but she gets to talk and interact with people all around her, and because she has this tablet device. And for the people out there, the engineers that built that, okay, we made the iPad, we made a tablet, we made a whatever. But I have a daughter, that's her whole portal to the whole world. And so when I think about where we're at right now with technology, like, that wasn't even when we had AI. That wasn't even when we could spin off robots that could talk to 8 million people at a time and have individualized communication. And so if there's one thing you take away from today, I hope it's excitement. I think that we're living a time that is difficult to comprehend how radically better things can improve. Just what I've seen in the last 18 months with our clients and with work we've done and with what's possible now, like, I'm bottlenecked by time more than anything else. It's not the technology. I have the technology to go out and tackle more things than I ever could have really imagined. And so, I guess, let me just take the time here real quick.
It's 7 minutes.
7 minutes? Wonderful. All right, well, raise your hand if you're feeling inspired. Yeah, okay, we got some excitement. All right. Thumbs up, thumbs down, this was a good use of your time. Okay, thumbs up, thumbs down. This was better than Kurt's session. I don't know, I wasn't there. Kurt puts on a good show. All right, well, we've got like 6 minutes left. So I'll just wrap up by saying I don't have a third theory of AI. I think 1 and 2 are pretty meaty. 1 is it understands us all. 2 is we can do really cool things now. So
What's the most disruptive thing?
hold up. No one can hear you unless.
What's the most disruptive, exciting thing that can happen soon? Like destroying the legal business, taking radiologists out of business because it does better, scans. Yeah, I think radical.
Oh, I love this question. So I love big disruption. I actually, in the roughly the last 50 years, this is where we've been. Time permitting, legal tech disruption. So the question was, what are some of the disruptions, right? We've got legal tech, we've got, so specifically on the legal front, we've got a lot of inconsistent law, and we have a lot of inconsistent case law, both of which can be refactored. So refactoring is when you go through and you rework your code so it runs better. Most people here should know that. The legal industry has never heard of this term before. And so one of the things that I would like to do as a personal project is take, for example, like the state law of Nevada. And side note, I ran for state senate, so I've been got 28% of the vote with $1,500, my charm and good looks. So, but we have the ability to literally have the machines go through and read the laws and find inconsistencies and have a more standardized law, like with tax law, there's a thing there too. So I've spent a lot of time in courtrooms. I've spent around $300,000 on attorneys. There's a lot of things that just the way that the courts run, and a part of it is a judge is going through a lot of text documents and reading things and making inferences and judgments. So, for example, in the legal world, if instead of having law clerks read stuff, we had AI read through it and say, here's the brief of the argument. Because some attorneys will pay some people will pay attorneys a lot of money to make bullshit arguments. And it's 50 pages. So like, for example, in Fairfax, Virginia, in the circuit court, you have 5 pages, single 1-inch margins, double spaced. That's all you can say. In Nevada, you got 30 pages. Just an enormous, and so a busy judge, is trying to go through all of these cases. They're on like a 30-day backlog or better now, or worse rather. And a lot of times they're just bogged down by the fact that arguments are presented, or with like self-represented folks, where the arguments presented it's not even obvious what the person's saying. So I would say in the legal space, if there was like initial case review workflow where when people submitted documents, we had a language model that would read through it and just summarize it, right? So for example, well, the guy owes me $1 million because he said he would give me $1 million and he didn't, so order him to give me $1 million. That would never hold up in court. But if somebody rants for 14 pages about that, there's no blow-off valve for it.
I think there's a lot of intentional inefficiencies to drive.
So no one can hear. I'm going to repeat what you just said, though, because I love it. There are a lot of intentional inefficiencies to drive profit. Yes, for what we could call terrible people. So, all right. Well, the end. If you want to add me on LinkedIn, there's my QR code.
So, lunchtime. Appreciate it, guys. And again, if you want to join the AI Meetup group, please do, meetup.com.